it's briefly, it's a pleasure, sort of with mixed feelings, that am I the oldest old Praetorian? Am I the oldest member of the OPU? It's probably a mixed blessing, but at least it gives me a chance to go over a few memories of my time at Pretoria, which, as you can see from the caption there, I went in 1943, and I was taken to the Great Northern Railway Station in Portadown by my father in or on or around the 20th of September 1943, which was the beginning of term. I wasn't sure what to expect, but my father himself was an old Praetorian and gave me some sort of clue. Then I'd already paid the mandatory pre-visit to Gloucester House earlier in the year, and I suppose I liked what I saw. But I particularly enjoyed the train journey, actually, because there was no petrol in those days during the war, so one couldn't drive. The roads are pretty grim anyway. And we went by train from Portadown to Omagh on the so-called Derry Express, where we changed onto a slower puffing billy for the journey to Enniskillen, passing through unlikely stations which were totally foreign to my ears, such as Fintona or Fintona Junction, where I believe there was a horse tram that took people to Fintona itself. There was Trillick and a few others. Bundoran Junction remains in my mind. But all too soon, we seemed to arrive at Enniskillen. The station was at the bottom of the town, and I remember making our way to Gloucester House with some difficulty. There weren't any taxis and very little petrol and so on. But there's Gloucester House, a fine building, which I had visited earlier in the year, as I say. It housed about 30 to 35 boys of mixed ages, ranging from the 7 to 8s, the 9s, the 10s. I was 10 at the time, to the seniors who were largely preparing for common entrance to Pretoria and other similar schools. Educationally, I was placed in B set.
I suppose just to briefly set the scene, I'm Philip Simpson and Richard shortly as well. We'll speak in a moment, but we're at the other end of the spectrum. We were at Pretoria from 2008 to 2015, and I suppose handsomely have the title of the youngest old Praetorians, I think, certainly in London, as part of the OPU. So, no, I think we'd just love to briefly touch on a few points. Some points from Pretoria will certainly be the same, and it's interesting to hear Muir talk about some of the icons of Pretoria that certainly haven't changed over the years, and some things that certainly have changed as well. So yeah, I think if Richard and I were both at Pretoria 2008 2015. We were in the same form class. Mr. McCallum, who's still at Pretoria, was our form teacher. Yeah, we did a great time. Before setting off to England. I went to Bath to study maths, and Richard went to UCL in London to study Jewish and Hebrew studies. So yeah, just a little bit about us before we jump in. So if you could flick on to the next slide, Ian, I think I'd just like to touch on a couple of things about Pretoria, a couple of recognizable icons. Just a couple of things. Firstly, when we started at Pretoria, it's the looming massive black gates at the bottom of the hill that you have to proceed through. I remember that on my first day, closely followed by just the imposing building at the top of the hill. They're all great sights, and it's good to see that still there today, and indeed we're there back when you were there, Muir, as well. So I distinctly remember on our first day being brought up to the chapel as it is now, and Miss Vincent, who was head of Year 8, going through the rigmarole of what it is to be a Praetorian, what omnes honorates means, the jump up that was required from a sleepy Ross Lea, where I'm from, and Kesh, where Richard's from. So no, that was certainly a great time on our first day of tour, and great to see that. Yeah, it's still the same. The icon of Pretoria on the hill. A couple of images there. So the chapel at the bottom left, as I mentioned, yeah, and Stone Hall and the Steel Hall, a little change from Muir's day, but still largely the skeletons there.
Northridge told me that there were a couple of minute books from the Old Praetorian Union, the early years, and he very kindly gave me the second one. I then got the first one, which had to make a bit more sense of the story. But I've transcribed the minutes, and I'm in the process of correcting them, and hopefully we load them up onto the London branch website so that people will be able to look through them for themselves. Particularly the older book is stuffed full of letters and notes and documents which they'll be difficult to transcribe, but again, they're a sort of great source of information about the Old Praetorian Union. But if you go on to the next slide, Ian.
Can you see that?
Yes, that's it. Yep.
Yeah.
On the right is the menu for a dinner, which was held in the Bolton Hotel in Dublin in 1879. Prior to that, Old Praetorians at Trinity had held high table dinners and invited Old Praetorians living in the Dublin area to come and dine with them. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in July 1919, at a tercentenary luncheon in Enniskillen, Archbishop Crozier, who was the Archbishop of Armagh at the time, suggested forming the OPU. That's at the unveiling of the War Memorial, which of course is the Great War Memorial, and we're not quite sure when that was. I need to check. There was a general agreement that the OPU should be formed, and the first president and officers were appointed. And the first president was the Honourable J.G. Gibson, PC, and he was the Chief Justice of Ireland at the time. And as we know, on the 9th of November 1921, the first committee meeting was held. Do you go on to the next slide?
Okay.
Yeah. The president was the Right Honourable J.G. Gibson. The vice presidents were Lord Donnelly, the Dean of St. Patrick's, who I think had previously been the Dean of St. Macartn's in Enniskillen, and Dr. Louis Purser, the Vice Provost of Trinity. And he was a contemporary of Oscar Wilde's at Pretoria. They were in the same year. Both studied classics. Purser became the professor of Latin in Trinity. So there's no indication that they were great friends, but most certainly must have known each other. The committee